The Menendez brothers' parasite. The Menendez mansion stood like a silent sentinel on Elm Drive, its manicured lawns and gleaming facade a testament to wealth and prestige in the heart of Beverly Hills. In the summer of 1989, this opulent enclave of Los Angeles was a world of shimmering excess, where palm trees swayed under the California sun and the elite lived in curated perfection. But behind the heavy oak doors of 722 North Elm Drive, a darkness festered, one that would erupt into a crime so brutal it would shock the nation and leave a scar on the gilded image of Beverly Hills. This is the story of Lyle and Erik Menendez, two brothers whose names would become synonymous with betrayal, bloodshed, and a chilling question: what drives a son to kill his own parents? Lyle Menendez, born Joseph Lyle Menendez on January 10, 1968, was the elder of the two, a 21-year-old with a preppy charm and a privileged upbringing that masked a turbulent inner world. Tall, with a strong jaw and a penchant for expensive sweaters, Lyle carried the weight of his father's expectations like a yoke. He was the heir apparent to a family legacy built on ambition and control, yet his time at Princeton University had been marred by academic struggles and a suspension for plagiarism. His polished exterior hid a restless defiance, a young man chafing against the rigid mold his father had crafted for him. Lyle's life was one of contradictions. A golden boy who threw out his college roommates' belongings to claim space. A son who worshipped his father, yet harbored secrets that would unravel everything. Erik Galen Menendez, born November 27, 1970, was the younger brother, 18 years old at the time of the crime, with a quieter demeanor and a talent for tennis that had earned him a national ranking. His boyish features and soulful eyes belied a sensitivity that seemed at odds with the violence that would later define him. Erik was the introspective one, a dreamer who co-wrote a screenplay about a perfect murder, a chilling foreshadowing of the horrors to come. He attended Beverly Hills High School, where he was known less for academic brilliance and more for his grace on the court. Yet, beneath his athletic prowess, Erik carried a burden heavier than any match point, a secret he had guarded since childhood, one that would drive him to the edge of despair. Their parents, Jose and Mary Louise Kitty Menendez, were the architects of this gilded cage. Jose, born in Havana in 1944, was a Cuban immigrant who arrived in the United States as a teenager during the Cuban Revolution, penniless but fiercely determined. He clawed his way to success, earning an accounting degree from Queens College and rising through the corporate ranks to become a powerhouse executive. By 1989, he was the CEO of Live Entertainment, a division of Carolco Pictures, with a resume that included stints at Hertz and RCA Records, where he signed acts like Menudo and Eurythmics. Jose was a man of unrelenting ambition, a perfectionist whose charisma masked a controlling nature. To the outside world, he was a titan of industry. To his sons, he was a tyrant whose expectations were as suffocating as they were unattainable. Kitty, born Mary Louise Anderson in 1941 in Oak Lawn, Illinois, was a former beauty queen who met Jose at Southern Illinois University. She abandoned her teaching career after Lyle's birth, devoting herself to raising her sons in a world of privilege that moved from New York to New Jersey and finally to California. But Kitty was no idyllic mother. Described by some as mentally unstable, an alcoholic and drug addict, she was a volatile presence in the household. Her mood swung like a pendulum, and her complicity in her husband's harsh discipline cast a long shadow over her sons. The Menendez family was a portrait of wealth, private schools, sprawling homes, and the trappings of success. But beneath the surface, it was a pressure cooker of dysfunction, where love was conditional and secrets were buried deep. The motive that would propel Lyle and Erik to commit the unthinkable was rooted in a claim so shocking it would polarize a nation, a lifetime of abuse at the hands of their parents. According to the brothers, Jose was not just a demanding patriarch, but a predator, a man who inflicted years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse on his sons. Lyle testified that the abuse began when he was 6, a violation that continued until he was 8, stopping abruptly without explanation, leaving scars that never healed. Erik's torment, he claimed, was even more relentless, continuing into adulthood, a secret he carried until he confided in Lyle just weeks before the murders. The brothers alleged that Jose's control extended to every facet of their lives, from their academic performance to their personal relationships, enforced with a cruelty that left them living in constant fear. Kitty, they claimed, was complicit, an enabler who turned a blind eye to her husband's atrocities and added her own brand of violence. Lyle recounted a chilling incident to his cousin, Diane Vandermolen, when he was 8, confessing that his father was touching him inappropriately. Kitty's response was not to protect but to punish, dragging Lyle upstairs in a rage, dismissing his cries as exaggeration. Another cousin, Andy Cano, testified that Erik, at 13, confided that Jose was massaging his D******, a secret he was sworn to keep. The brothers painted a picture of a household where fear was a constant companion, where their father's threats to kill them if they exposed the abuse hung like a guillotine. They claimed they armed themselves with shotguns not for greed but for survival, believing their parents were plotting to silence them forever. Yet, the brothers' claims were not without skepticism. Prosecutors would later argue that the abuse allegations were a convenient fabrication, a desperate bid to justify a cold-blooded act driven by greed. Jose's fortune, estimated at $14 million, equivalent to $35 million today, was a tantalizing motive. The brothers stood to inherit it all, and their actions in the months following the murders would cast a long shadow over their claims of victimhood. The question lingered: were Lyle and Erik Menendez tortured souls driven to desperation, or calculating killers who saw murder as a shortcut to freedom and wealth? The Menendez family story was one of contrasts, glamour and horror, privilege and pain. Their Beverly Hills mansion, once a symbol of the American dream, would become a crime scene that haunted the nation. As the sun set on August 20th, 1989, the stage was set for a tragedy that would unfold in a hail of gunfire, leaving behind a trail of questions that still echo today. What drove two young men to turn on the very people who gave them everything? Was it fear, as they claimed, or something far darker? The answers lie in the shadows of that fateful night, where the line between victim and villain blurred in a way that would captivate and terrify the world. The night of August 20th, 1989, was oppressively warm in Beverly Hills, the kind of evening where the air clung to the skin and the stars hid behind a haze of city lights. Inside the palatial mansion at 722 North Elm Drive, the Menendez family appeared to be settling into a quiet Sunday night. Jose Menendez, the formidable patriarch, reclined in the den, his tie loosened, his eyes fixed on the flickering television screen. Beside him sat Kitty, her auburn hair catching the glow of the chandelier, a bowl of ice cream in her lap. The den, with its plush leather furniture and wood-paneled walls, was a sanctuary of wealth, a room where deals were sealed and dreams were sold. But tonight, it would become a slaughterhouse, its walls forever stained with the echoes of a crime so brutal it would sear itself into the annals of American true crime. Lyle and Erik Menendez, the golden sons of this empire, had spent the day cloaked in normalcy. They'd gone to the movies, or so they claimed, catching a screening of Batman at a local theater, their alibis as carefully curated as their designer wardrobes. But as the clock ticked toward 10 p.m., the brothers were not at the cinema or mingling with Beverly Hills elite. They were in a sporting goods store, their pulses racing, purchasing 2 Mossberg 12-gauge shotguns under a false name. The weapons, cold and heavy in their hands, were not for sport or self-defense, but for an act so unthinkable it would shatter the illusion of their perfect lives. The brothers, dressed in casual yet calculated attire, Lyle in a polo shirt, Erik in a tennis sweater, returned to their mansion, their hearts pounding with a mix of dread and determination. What drove them to this moment? Was it the weight of years of alleged abuse, or the seductive promise of a fortune they could finally claim? The den's heavy curtains were drawn, muffling the sounds of the outside world, as Jose and Kitty watched The Spy Who Loved Me. The television's glow cast long shadows, oblivious to the storm about to erupt. Lyle, 21, and Erik, 18, slipped through the mansion's back entrance, their shotguns concealed, their steps silent on the marble floors. The brothers had planned this moment, or so it seemed, with a precision that belied their youth. They had discussed it in hushed tones, their voices trembling with fear and resolve. In the days leading up to this night, The air in the mansion was thick with tension, the kind that makes the skin prickle and the heart race. They knew what they were about to do would change everything. There was no turning back. At approximately 10:03 p.m., the first shot rang out, a deafening blast that tore through the den's tranquility. Jose Menendez, the man who had built an empire from nothing, never saw it coming. The 12-gauge slug slammed into his head, a point-blank execution that sprayed blood across the leather sofa and splattered the walls with crimson. His body slumped lifeless as the television droned on, indifferent to the carnage. Kitty, startled from her ice cream, screamed, a raw, guttural sound that was cut short by the second blast. The brothers, their faces masks of adrenaline-fueled terror, unleashed a barrage of gunfire, the shotguns roaring like thunder in the confined space. Kitty tried to crawl away, her nails clawing at the carpet, her body racked with pain as pellets tore through her flesh. 10 shots for Jose, 9 for Kitty, a total of 19 blasts that left the den a grotesque tableau of blood, bone, and betrayal. The scene was horrific, a nightmare painted in red. Jose's head was nearly obliterated, his skull shattered, his blood pooling beneath him like a dark halo. Kitty's body lay twisted, her face unrecognizable, her limbs riddled with wounds. The room reeked of gunpowder and death, the air heavy with the metallic tang of blood. The brothers stood over their parents, their hands trembling, their breaths ragged. The shotguns, still warm, were discarded in a panic, their purpose served. But the horror was only beginning. The brothers' plan, if it could be called that, was unraveling even as the echoes of the gunfire faded. They had to act fast, to cover their tracks in a world that would soon turn its unforgiving gaze upon them. Lyle, ever the leader, took charge. He barked orders at Erik, his voice a mix of authority and desperation. They gathered the spent shotgun shells, their fingers fumbling in the dim light, careful not to leave evidence that could tie them to the massacre. The brothers concocted a story, a flimsy alibi that would soon crumble under scrutiny. They drove to a nearby alley, disposing of the shells and their blood-stained clothes, their hearts pounding as they tried to erase the night's horrors. Then, in a move that would haunt them, they returned to the mansion, their faces pale but composed, and called 911. Lyle's voice, trembling yet calculated, crackled through the line. "Someone killed my parents." The operator, calm and professional, dispatched police to Elm Drive, unaware that the killers were the ones weeping into the phone. When the police arrived, they found a scene that defied comprehension. The den was a slaughterhouse, the bodies of Jose and Kitty Menendez barely recognizable amidst the carnage. Blood soaked the carpet, splattered the walls, and dripped from the ceiling. The officers, hardened by years on the force, felt their stomachs churn. The brothers, meanwhile, played their parts to perfection. Lyle, tears streaming down his face, recounted a tale of returning home from the movies to find their parents gunned down by unknown intruders. Erik, sobbing uncontrollably, collapsed into his brother's arms, his grief so raw it seemed genuine. The police, moved by the brothers' apparent devastation, initially treated them as victims, not suspects. The mansion, once a symbol of untouchable wealth, was now a crime scene, cordoned off with yellow tape as detectives combed through the wreckage. But the brothers' performance, while convincing, was not flawless. The crime scene raised questions that gnawed at the investigators. The sheer brutality of the murders suggested a personal vendetta, not a random hit. Jose had been shot at close range, his head targeted with precision, while Kitty's wound spoke of a frenzied, almost desperate attack. The absence of forced entry was another red flag. How had the killers entered the fortress-like mansion undetected? And then there were the brothers themselves, their grief tinged with inconsistencies. Lyle's cool-headedness, his quick answers, and Erik's theatrical sobs began to feel rehearsed. The police, trained to spot deception, sensed something was amiss, but without hard evidence, they could only watch as the brothers slipped through their fingers. In the hours after the murders, the brothers' behavior grew bolder, their actions a bizarre mix of mourning and indulgence. They claimed to be devastated, yet their actions told a different story. Lyle purchased a Porsche 911 Turbo for $64,000, its sleek black curves a stark contrast to the blood-soaked den. Erik, meanwhile, hired a full-time tennis coach, chasing a dream his father had once dismissed. The brothers dined at the finest restaurants, booked luxury vacations, and shopped at Rodeo Drive, their spending spree totaling over $700,000 in the months following the murders. To the outside world, they were grieving sons. To those who looked closer, they were young men reveling in newfound freedom, their parents' fortune now at their fingertips. The tension mounted as whispers of suspicion began to circulate. Neighbors reported hearing no gunshots that night, odd given the shotgun's deafening roar. Friends of the family noted the brothers' lavish purchases, their carefree demeanor jarring against the backdrop of tragedy. The police, meanwhile, were piecing together a timeline that didn't add up. The brothers' alibi, the movie, the late-night return, began to fray under scrutiny. Where were the ticket stubs? Why had no one seen them at the theater? The detective's instincts screamed that the truth was closer than it seemed, hidden in the shadows of the Menendez mansion. The climax came not from a dramatic chase or a smoking gun, but from a betrayal of trust. Erik, haunted by the weight of what they had done, confided in his therapist, Dr. Jerome Oziel, in a moment of vulnerability. His confession, raw and unfiltered, spilled out in a torrent of guilt and fear. He described the planning, the purchase of the shotguns, the moment they pulled the triggers. Lyle, furious at Erik's indiscretion, joined the sessions, attempting to control the narrative. But the damage was done. Dr. Oziel, torn between ethics and self-preservation, recorded the confessions, his tapes becoming the linchpin of the case. When Oziel's mistress, Judalon Smith, overheard the tapes and tipped off the police, the brothers' carefully constructed facade began to crumble. The resolution of this chapter was swift and merciless. The police, armed with the tapes, closed in. On March 8, 1990, Lyle was arrested outside the Elm Drive mansion, his hands cuffed as paparazzi cameras flashed. Erik, learning of his brother's capture, surrendered days later. The brothers, once untouchable, were now suspects in a double homicide that had captivated the nation. The den, with its blood-soaked carpet and shattered dreams, stood as a silent witness to their crime. The stage was set for a trial that would lay bare the secrets of the Menendez family, a spectacle of wealth, betrayal, and bloodshed that would leave the world questioning. Were these brothers victims or monsters? The sun rose over Beverly Hills on August 21, 1989, casting a golden glow on the manicured lawns of Elm Drive. But the Menendez mansion at number 722 stood as a grim anomaly, its opulent facade now a shroud for the carnage within. The double murder of Jose and Kitty Menendez had sent shockwaves through the elite enclave, and the Los Angeles Police Department was under pressure to solve a case that reeked of personal vendetta. The den, with its blood-soaked carpet and bullet-riddled walls, whispered secrets the police were desperate to unravel. Yet, as detectives combed through the crime scene, Lyle and Erik Menendez, the grieving sons, were already weaving a web of deception, their every move a calculated dance to evade suspicion. The pursuit that followed was a game of cat and mouse, charged with intrigue, decadence, and a chilling audacity that kept the world guessing. In the immediate aftermath of the murders, Lyle and Erik played their roles with Oscar-worthy precision. Lyle, the elder at 21, stood tall and composed, his preppy charm masking a steely resolve. His tears during the 911 call had been raw, his voice cracking as he pleaded, "Someone killed my parents." Erik, just 18, was the picture of devastation, his boyish face streaked with tears, his body trembling as he clung to his brother. The police, arriving at the mansion in the early hours, found the brothers' grief convincing, their story of returning from a movie to discover the massacre plausible. No forced entry, no witnesses, no immediate suspects. The case seemed destined to be a mystery, a mob hit or a random act of violence, as the brothers suggested. But beneath their polished exteriors, Lyle and Erik were not mourning. They were orchestrating a performance to rival Hollywood's finest, their every gesture a step toward freedom. The brothers' first act of evasion was to immerse themselves in the trappings of their newfound wealth. Jose's $14 million fortune, equivalent to $35 million today, was now within reach, and Lyle and Erik embraced it with a fervor that bordered on obscene. Days after the murders, Lyle was behind the wheel of a sleek Porsche 911 Turbo, its $64,000 price tag a glittering emblem of his liberation. Erik, meanwhile, hired a full-time tennis coach, his dreams of professional stardom suddenly within grasp. The brothers jetted off to the Caribbean, dined at Spago, and shopped on Rodeo Drive, their spending spree topping $700,000 in mere months. Rolex watches, designer suits, and a new Jeep Cherokee filled their lives, each purchase a bold declaration of their untouchability. To the outside world, they were grieving sons. To those who watched closely, their extravagance was a siren song of suspicion, a reckless flaunting of blood money. The police, led by Detective Les Zoller, were not blind to the brothers' behavior. The crime scene had raised red flags from the start. The ferocity of the attack, 19 shotgun blasts, 10 for Jose, 9 for Kitty, suggested rage, not robbery. Jose's head was nearly obliterated, a point-blank execution, while Kitty's body bore the marks of a desperate, frenzied assault. The absence of forced entry gnawed at Zoller. The mansion's security system was intact, the gates unbreached. Who could have entered undetected? The brothers' alibi, a late-night movie, a vague timeline, was flimsy, with no ticket stubs or witnesses to corroborate their story. Neighbors reported hearing no gunshots, odd given the shotgun's deafening roar. The detectives' instincts screamed that the killers were closer than they appeared, but without hard evidence. Lyle and Erik remained untouchable, their wealth a shield against scrutiny. As the investigation deepened, the brothers' evasion tactics grew bolder, their confidence bordering on arrogance. Lyle, ever the strategist, took charge of the family's affairs, liquidating assets and managing the estate with a cool-headedness that belied his age. He purchased a restaurant in Princeton, New Jersey, called Chuck's Spring Street Cafe, a nod to his East Coast roots and a way to launder their image as dutiful sons. Erik, meanwhile, threw himself into tennis, training with a fervor that seemed to mask his inner turmoil. They attended their parents' memorial service, their faces somber, their tears plentiful, but whispers among family and friends grew louder. Why were they spending so lavishly? Why did their grief seem so performative? The tension was palpable, a slow-burning fuse that threatened to ignite at any moment. The police pursuit intensified, with Zoller and his team digging into the brothers' lives. Financial records revealed the staggering scope of their spending, each transaction a breadcrumb leading back to Elm Drive. Detectives interviewed friends, neighbors, and associates, piecing together a picture of a dysfunctional family ruled by Jose's iron fist and Kitty's volatile moods. Rumors of abuse surfaced, whispers of Jose's controlling nature, of Kitty's alcoholism, but nothing concrete enough to shift the focus from the brothers' opulent lifestyle. The media, sensing a scandal, began to circle, their headlines painting Lyle and Erik as spoiled heirs with motive to spare. The pressure was mounting, and the brothers' carefully crafted facade was beginning to crack. The turning point came not from police work, but from a betrayal born of vulnerability. Erik, haunted by the weight of their crime, could no longer bear the silence. In October 1989, he sought out Dr. Jerome Oziel, a Beverly Hills therapist with a reputation for discretion. In a dimly lit office, Erik's composure shattered, his voice trembling as he confessed the unthinkable. He and Lyle had killed their parents. The words spilled out like a dam breaking, a torrent of guilt, fear, and justification. He spoke of years of alleged abuse, of Jose's threats to kill them if they exposed his secrets, of a plan born of desperation. Lyle, enraged by Erik's indiscretion, joined the sessions, his presence a chilling counterpoint to his brother's anguish. The brothers laid bare their story, unaware that Oziel was recording every word, his tapes a ticking time bomb that would soon detonate their world. The tension reached a fever pitch as Oziel grappled with his ethical dilemma. California law required him to report threats of harm, but this was a confession of a crime already committed. Torn between duty and self-preservation, he confided in his mistress, Judalon Smith, sharing the explosive tapes. Smith, a volatile figure with her own agenda, became the wild card in the brothers' evasion. In a fit of anger after their relationship soured, she contacted the police in March 1990, revealing the existence of the tapes. The revelation was a thunderclap, shattering the brothers' illusion of invincibility. Zoller, armed with Smith's tip, obtained a warrant for the tapes, navigating a legal minefield over patient confidentiality. The recordings, raw and unfiltered, captured Lyle and Erik's chilling admissions, their voices a haunting blend of bravado and despair. The climax came swiftly, a crescendo of justice closing in. On March 8, 1990, Lyle was arrested outside the Elm Drive mansion, his Porsche gleaming in the driveway as police cuffed him under a barrage of camera flashes. Erik, learning of his brother's capture while in Israel for a tennis tournament, surrendered days later, his dreams of escape crumbling. The brothers, once the darlings of Beverly Hills, were now inmates, their wealth and charm powerless against the weight of their confessions. The police pursuit had been relentless, a slow burn that erupted into a blaze of arrests, but the resolution was only the beginning. The tapes, now in the hands of prosecutors, set the stage for a trial that would captivate the nation, a spectacle of wealth, betrayal, and a question that lingered like a shadow. Were Lyle and Erik victims driven to murder, or cold-blooded killers hiding behind a mask of trauma? The aftermath was electric, the media frenzy transforming the Menendez brothers into household names. The mansion, once a symbol of untouchable privilege, stood empty, its walls whispering of the horrors within. The police, vindicated yet haunted by the case's brutality, prepared for a legal battle that would test the limits of justice. Lyle and Erik, now behind bars, faced a future defined by their own words, their confessions a noose tightening around their necks. The world watched enthralled and horrified as the next chapter loomed, a trial that would lay bare the darkest secrets of the Menendez family, leaving no one untouched by its chilling revelations. The spring of 1990 was a season of reckoning in Beverly Hills, where the palm-lined streets and glittering mansions hid a scandal that had gripped the nation. The Menendez brothers, Lyle and Erik, once the golden heirs of a multimillion-dollar empire, were now fugitives in their own story, their carefully crafted facade of grief and innocence crumbling under the weight of their own confessions. The double murder of Jose and Kitty Menendez at 722 North Elm Drive had shocked the world, but it was the pursuit and capture of the brothers that ignited a firestorm of intrigue, transforming their saga into a televised spectacle that would redefine true crime. As the gavel fell in a Los Angeles courtroom, the stage was set for a trial that would lay bare the darkest corners of the Menendez family, leaving the world to grapple with a chilling question. Were these brothers victims or villains? The capture of Lyle Menendez on March 8, 1990, was a scene ripped from a Hollywood thriller. Outside the Elm Drive mansion, police cars converged under the glare of paparazzi flashes, their sirens piercing the quiet opulence of Beverly Hills. Lyle, 22, stood defiant in his designer sweater, his hands cuffed as officers led him away from the Porsche that had symbolized his fleeting freedom. The arrest was swift, surgical, the culmination of months of dogged police work led by Detective Les Zoller. The key to Lyle's downfall was a set of audio tapes, recorded by Dr. Jerome Oziel, the brothers' therapist, who had become an unwitting confidant to their crime. Erik, 19, was in Israel, chasing his tennis dreams, when he learned of Lyle's arrest. His surrender days later, on March 11th, was quieter but no less dramatic, his boyish face pale as he stepped off a plane into the arms of waiting officers. The brothers, once untouchable, were now inmates, their wealth powerless against the iron grip of justice. The confessions that sealed their fate were a chilling blend of desperation and calculation. In October 1989, Erik, tormented by guilt, had poured his soul out to Dr. Oziel, his voice trembling as he recounted the night of August 20th, 1989. He described the purchase of the Mossberg shotguns, the silent approach through the mansion's back entrance, the deafening roar of 19 blasts that left Jose and Kitty lifeless in their den. Lyle, furious at Erik's indiscretion, joined the sessions, his presence a cold counterpoint to his brother's anguish. The brothers claimed they acted out of fear, alleging years of physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of their father, with Kitty as a complicit enabler. They painted a picture of a household ruled by terror, where Jose's threats to kill them if they exposed his secrets drove them to murder. But the tapes, raw and unfiltered, also revealed a chilling pragmatism, discussions of alibis, of disposing evidence, of a future bathed in their parents' fortune. The revelation of the tapes, courtesy of Ozil's mistress, Judalon Smith, was a bombshell that sent shockwaves through the case. Smith, scorned and volatile, had tipped off the police, leading to a legal battle over the tape's admissibility. Prosecutors, led by Deputy District Attorney Pamela Bozanik, argued that the confessions were admissible, overriding patient confidentiality because they detailed a completed crime. The defense, spearheaded by Leslie Abramson for Erik and Jill Lansing for Lyle, fought tooth and nail, claiming the tapes violated privilege. The courtroom became a battleground, each side wielding legal arguments like weapons, the tension palpable as the world watched. The tapes were ultimately deemed admissible, a devastating blow to the brothers, their own voices now their greatest betrayers. The trials, beginning in 1993, were a media circus, broadcast live on court TV, turning the Menendez brothers into household names. The Van Nuys courtroom was a stage, its oak-paneled walls echoing with the drama of a Greek tragedy. Lyle, with his polished demeanor, and Erik, with his soulful eyes, sat side by side, their tailored suits a stark contrast to the orange jumpsuits of their jail cells. The prosecution painted them as spoiled heirs, driven by greed for their $14 million inheritance, equivalent to $35 million today. Bozanik argued that the brothers' abuse claims were a fabrication, a convenient excuse for a cold-blooded execution. She pointed to their lavish spending, Lyle's Porsche, Erik's tennis coach, their $700,000 spree, as evidence of motive, their tears in court a performance to sway the jury. The defense, however, wove a narrative of desperation, a tale of two boys trapped in a nightmare of abuse. Leslie Abramson, a firebrand with a reputation for tenacity, took center stage, her voice a mix of fury and compassion as she detailed the alleged horrors of the Menendez household. Erik testified, his voice breaking, about years of sexual abuse by Jose, beginning at age 6 and continuing into adulthood. Lyle recounted similar trauma, his stoic facade cracking as he described his father's control and Kitty's complicity. Witnesses, including cousins Diane Vandermolen and Andy Cano, corroborated parts of their story, recalling chilling childhood confessions of abuse. The defense argued that the brothers believed their parents were planning to kill them to silence their secrets, making the murders an act of self-defense, however misguided. The courtroom was electric, each revelation a spark that ignited public fascination. Jurors wept as Erik described his father's threats, their faces hardening as prosecutors played the Ozil tapes, Lyle's voice coolly discussing the disposal of shotgun shells. The media frenzy was relentless, with tabloids splashing headlines like Beverly Hills Bloodbath and talk shows dissecting every detail. The brothers' good looks and privileged upbringing added a layer of allure, their story a twisted blend of glamour and gore. Were they tortured souls or cunning killers? The question hung like a storm cloud, fueling debates in living rooms and newsrooms alike. The first trial, with separate juries for each brother, ended in a deadlock in January 1994. The jury split between manslaughter and murder. The mistrial was a shock, the brothers' fate hanging in limbo as the nation reeled. The second trial, consolidated under Judge Stanley Weisberg in 1995, was a different beast. Weisberg limited the abuse defense, barring much of the emotional testimony that had swayed the first juries. The prosecution doubled down, portraying the brothers as sociopaths who planned the murders with chilling precision. The defense fought back, but the absence of the abuse narrative left them hobbled. The courtroom tension peaked as closing arguments loomed, the brothers' futures teetering on a knife's edge. On March 20th, 1996, the verdict came like a thunderclap. Lyle and Erik Menendez were convicted of 2 counts each of first-degree murder. The courtroom was silent, the brothers' faces ashen as the words "life without parole" echoed through the room. The sentencing phase was a final act of drama, with the defense pleading for leniency, citing the brothers' youth and alleged trauma. But the jury, unmoved, recommended life sentences, and Weisberg agreed. On July 2, 1996, Lyle and Erik were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, their fates sealed in a California penitentiary. The gavel fell, and the Menendez mansion, now a ghostly relic, stood as a monument to their downfall. Yet, the resolution was anything but final. The trial's outcome left questions unanswered, threads of mystery that tugged at the edges of the case. Were the brothers' abuse claims true, or a masterful manipulation? Did the second trial's restrictions on the abuse defense rob them of justice? Whispers of new evidence, letters, witnesses, a shifting cultural understanding of abuse, hinted at a story far from over. The Menendez brothers, now in their 50s, remain behind bars, their appeals and bids for resentencing a faint flicker of hope. The world, still captivated, wonders, what secrets remain buried in the shadows of Elm Drive? This saga of betrayal, bloodshed, and broken dreams is far from its final chapter. The Menendez story continues to unravel, with twists that promise to shock and enthrall. To uncover what lies ahead, new evidence, legal battles, or perhaps a glimpse into the brothers' lives behind bars, stay tuned to our channel for the next installment. The truth, like the Menendez mansion itself, holds more than meets the eye, and the next chapter will leave you breathless,